Welcome to Paranormal M, your home for spine-chilling stories and paranormal phenomena. Subscribe and turn on notifications to stay on top of our latest ghostly adventures. Enjoy the journey into the unknown. I think spirits are finding me in my dreams, but I wanted to stop. The bear getting more evil than a couple nights ago was too much. So, 35-year-old male. Always had freaky weird things happen in my sleep. Like when I was little, 3 to 5 years old, I had this big football that hung on the wall with hooks on it for backpacks and jackets. My earliest dream memory was a repeat dream of looking down the hall and seeing this figure just standing in front of that football. It never noticed me, but I noticed it. Next, we moved to another city in the 2nd grade to an old house. Week 1, sleep paralysis. Definitely something holding me down in bed. Couldn't even scream for my parents. And this is actually my first telling anyone about that. When I was about 10 or 12 years old, my grandmother passed away. And no joke, this woman hated me. Couldn't stand her much either. But a few months later after she passed, she came to me in a dream. She was black and white while the dream was in color. Looked very, very dead and black eyes, tattered clothes, only thing she had was this glitterly rainbow ambience. She looked at me. She told me she was okay with it and picked up her dog, and I woke up. Next day, her household dog, who ended up adopting, vanished. Poof. Gone. A month or so after that, my grandpa announced that he was getting remarried. Well, night before the wedding, sitting around the table playing 750 with dice, late at night, he asked my dad, which was his son, if he thought Mama would be okay with him remarrying. I just chirped into no thought, saying yes, that she said he's happy and just do it. Didn't realize I'd spoken till the words were already out. My time in the Navy, like early adult, I kept having these dreams of people with no face. And all of them gave me this feeling that I knew them. Some reoccurring, when I'd wake up, I'd have this urge to go and find them. Like you lost your brother or sister. Your mama makes you go find them, that gut feeling. I always felt bad because to me they were real and seemed to need help, but they had no face and left me with no clues. So I would always just be on the lookout for that feeling of those people. Like you can feel when someone's mad, happy, or sad, but this was just their presence. 8 years in the Navy, similar dreams. I got out in 2012. And then demons start showing up. I had a dream that was split screen for all you gamers out there. And my grandpa, my mom's dad, was on the right, and this black massive thing with like a body, arms, and smoke for legs was on the top. And a big head with 3 red eyes, and this triangle pattern like it was showing me something. Now, he has severe dementia. He's probably not going to be around much longer. 2017. I had this dream that an actual demon had crawled out of me. It was climbing the walls and destroying my house, and it was mad. Evil angry. I mean, wanting to rip my body to pieces. It's shown up a couple more times, just showing me things. Horrible, terrifying things with me, my wife and daughter's death, burning, torture. Too much for Dad to watch. Now, as of 2 days ago, this dream just went too far. Sometimes sleep on the couch, and my daughters, 3 and 4, sometimes come just kind of hog the bed and snuggle Mama. So I wind up saying fuck it and go crash on the big couch. Well, this night I had this dream of a tall, skinny, dark shadow thing holding me down and beating the ever-living dog shit out of me. Choking me, scratching me. It was also pissed. I felt all of its hate and rage. When I woke up, I was trapped in like an inhale of breath and couldn't move or let it out. I had this feeling that I was actually in the room still. I could still smell it. It was there. So I got up, went outside, smoked a half a joint, at like 2 or 3 a.m. and crashed. I was thinking it was a nightmare. But this time it was torturing my family. I kept hearing the same Tom over and over, and it was diabolical in his laughter. I watched my family being tortured. Then it came back to me and I woke up in fear. Now, 2 days later, my wife sat me down asking for a divorce, just out of the blue, out of nowhere. think I've about had it with all this dream nonsense. I'd like for it to stop. It's now 1:30 Texas time. And here I am, 35-year-old grown-ass Navy veteran, terrified to go to sleep. Am I actually bonkers, or is this stuff actually happening? Sounds like some of that's actually happening. Someone's outside of my bedroom door. Now to this day, I still can't explain what happened this night. It was around 11 o'clock, and I was winding down for the night. I did my normal nightly routine, which included using the restroom and leaving a light on in the bathroom. Important later. I do this so I can see better when I'm going to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. So I climbed into bed and prepared to go to sleep. Not even 3 minutes into me laying down with my eyes closed, I hear very clearly the voice of a woman whispering into my ear, "I'm here." At that point, I shot up out of bed. But before I could do anything else, I hear footsteps walking up to my door. It stopped right outside of it. Now this could have been a random noise, but what's worse is that I would see the shadow of 2 feet standing just on the other side of my door. That was due to the light coming from the bathroom. At this point, I could barely move from a seated position, and I was in my bed. After about 5 minutes, I decided to turn on my TV, so I had some background noise. As the TV was powering on, though, I started to hear the sounds of someone breathing coming from underneath my bed. And I know it wasn't just me, because I could hear it even when I held my breath. So at this point, in absolute terror, I could barely move from my bed. It stayed that way for maybe another 2 or so hours. I don't remember why exactly, but at some point I needed to get out of bed and grab something. But I still was occasionally hearing breathing from underneath my bed. Felt better getting up knowing that I had a knife on my bedstand, but maybe I could defend myself if I needed to. So I got out of the bed and decided to look underneath. Grabbed a flashlight and my knife and then looked, and to my shock, there was nothing. This cleared up a little bit of terror that I was feeling there, but still, foot on the other side of the door. Built up the courage, opened the door, and yet again there was nothing there. Well, even after clearing this up, I still didn't sleep at all that night. To this day, I still cannot fathom what happened. I don't know how to explain it or if there is an explanation. But if you guys have any thoughts on what it could have been, could you please let me know? This happened about a month ago, and I haven't had any other experiences near this since. Friendly ghosts or still ghosts? When I was 19, I spent the night at my boyfriend Jay's house. His parents were on vacation, so we decided to sleep in their room. They have a queen-size bed, which was far better than his tiny twin bed. We watched some TV, and then Jay got up to switch off the TV. As I rolled over, I caught him staring at me with the weirdest look. I asked him what was wrong, and he said it was nothing, went to bed. I woke up at around 3 a.m. to a little ghost girl standing next to the bed. She had short black hair and was gray, kind of like a black and white movie. Freaked out and started screaming and shaking Jay to wake up. She was just disappearing. I turned back around. The little girl reappeared, now with a flower. I still continued to scream and she disappeared again. Jay finally woke up, asked what I saw, and I told him. I didn't want to talk about it, fearing that she might come back if I talk about her. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, Jay asked me again what I saw. I told him I wanted to just wait until I left that house to talk about it. He looked me dead in the face and said, "Did you see a little girl with short black hair?" I froze and asked him, "How did you know?" I had never told him what I saw. Jay said that he turned off the TV the night before and saw a little girl in the reflection of the TV. He didn't want to say anything since he knew how terrified of ghosts I was. But when I started screaming, he knew what I saw. He told his parents what happened the next day and asked if they ever saw anything, and they hadn't. I know the ghost was friendly, but still terrifying. Ball Cemetery. First paranormal experience happened in fall of 2011 at Ball Cemetery. It's about 20 miles outside of Omaha. It was maybe the first time I'd gone to the cemetery, but I'd heard all about its lore from a friend I was with. I was at an IHOP with my friend around 12:30, 1 a.m. He bought up Ball and the experiences he and others had there several times before. All scary stories like being scratched, bruised, and shoved. He said one girl we both knew had her eyes go completely black. He may have mentioned a voice telling them to get out. I'd always been intrigued by the paranormal, but healthily skeptical, you could say. Didn't really believe or didn't really not believe. We're at IHOP, he brings up Ball, asks if I want to go. I say sure, we finish our meal and head there. The road there, well, couldn't have been theatrically scary. It's pretty far out in the middle of nowhere, and you just kind of have to know where you're going. You have to turn your headlights off when you turn onto the road sort of leading there. Like whoever the caretaker of this place was, understandably not fond of people screwing around out there. They apparently had a shotgun that they weren't shy about firing off and a large dog that roamed around the property. There's a big no trespassing sign everywhere. It's also a one-way in, one-way out type of setup. You come to a fork in the road and curve left into a woodsy patch. The trees make this patch of road feel like a sort of tunnel. You emerge from the tree tunnel and you're there, and it's terrifying. The road's a gravel loop, and the way you come in is the way you get out. The cemetery itself has a gate. It was hanging open this night, but sometimes it's chained shut. My friend parks and I don't want to go out of the car, and we bitch back and forth at each other a bit. I say I'm scared, he gets fed up with me and says, "I've got a gun, I'll shoot the ghost." He demands I get out of the car. So we go into the cemetery. It's very dark, but not so dark that you can't see. Silhouettes of trees and headstones are clearly visible. I grab my friend's hand and won't let go. I'm going into this situation freaked out because 1, I don't want to get caught. 2, a lot of what haunts this place is apparently not friendly. Friendly. Interesting. My friend knows his way around, so I'm holding his hand and following him. We're in the middle of the cemetery and suddenly it gets really dark. SpongeBob Advanced Darkness. Not normal dark. I stopped walking and I couldn't see anything, but just standing there. I moved my free hand around in front of my face to see if I could see it. I couldn't. No silhouettes of anything, just pitch black. Figured my eyes were adjusting or something. Regular dark fades back in. Silhouettes are visible again, and off in the streets in the opposite direction of where the house on the property would be, I saw 2 circle-shaped lights. One orange orb and one blue orb. They were just moving around smoothly and silently out of the trees, weaving around. They didn't look like flashlights, but my rational brain thought, well, maybe they are, till they started doing this. They would never disappear, but they'd be in one spot and then they'd be in a completely different spot. They'd just be in one place and then be in another, all while never actually disappearing from sight. They'd be closer than farther away, all while never really disappearing. There's no noise, it was so quiet. It had been like somebody out there. I think they would have been making some sort of audible noise, like footsteps or talking and moving around. They did this for a while, then disappeared. Shortly after that, we heard a dog start barking and left quickly. I had an entity attached to me. When I was 7, I had my first paranormal experience. I lived in Germany at the time. I was in my room and I saw a figure that my memory is now sort of blacked out. I was filled with fear that was so indescribable. Fell to the floor, tried to scream, nothing comes out. I was terrified. When I was 12, I started hearing footsteps and seeing shadows. I watched a lot of paranormal content, and I was generally fascinated with the other side. Someone could say it was a trick of the mind. When I was 13, my mental health started going down rapidly. I had a new puppy, and one night he'd just be staring at something and fill with that same fear I once felt at 7. started to scare me and honestly piss me off because whatever it was scaring my baby. Anytime I tried to touch him after these experiences, he would just get terrified of everything around him. I had to stop wearing black PJs and using black blankets because he would jump at the black color at night. It was fine during the day for the most part, but it's safe to say sleeping was very hard after this. In 8th grade, a lot happened to me, especially to cause my mental health to worsen. Overall, I'd become the perfect target for a dark entity. Started sensing something everywhere I went, feeling taps and hearing my name being called, and I did my best to ignore it as I knew giving it attention would only make it worse. Well, I was home alone all day. Mom worked, I attended school, so she got home around 11 p.m. I started seeing 2 different shadow figures watching me sleep. Because I was scared, I turned the hallway light on before I went in and closed the door. I would see small feet shadows at the bottom of the door and a larger shadow at the top. My mom's closet has always scared me. I slept in her room at the time. I'd see a shadow figure watching me as I started opening the bathroom door to block the closet. Fortunately, the door didn't block the whole closet. I would see the figure sort of peering over the door at me. I would just roll over to the other side and convince myself I wasn't scared, trying to feed the spirit what it wanted. But unfortunately, it wasn't my fear it was feeding on. It was my depression. When I was 14, I moved again. I'm a military Bart and moved often. Bart? Brat, maybe? Well, I could tell the spirits followed me. Still felt the taps and heard my name being called, but I was pretty much used to all of this at this point. My depression was at one of its worst points. I didn't have friends as I moved right before COVID happened, and I would see shadows going up and down the halls and more things than really now we're talking about. My dog still experiences what happens at night. One night I was alone because my dog was scared of the room. I started to get a feeling that I wasn't alone. When I felt my leg getting pulled, I froze. I froze right before it pulled my leg back. I was frozen in fear. I'd have left my room and slept somewhere else, but I don't feel safe anywhere. I started screaming. I wanted to leave me alone or to leave my dog alone, telling whatever it was that it wasn't welcome here. After I started doing that, it would get better and then worse. I'd have to do it again. Right before my 16th birthday, I went to a psych ward. I got the help I needed and became overall so much happier. I kept telling the entity it wasn't welcome, and eventually, as I got happier, it all stopped. Turning 17 in a few days, and I've been safe ever since. I don't feel taps or hear voices. I truly believe that me not being depressed, well, maybe makes this entity have no reason to stick around, right? I know this isn't the best storytelling, but I hope it made sense, because this was very real for me. I still think about it to this day. I concede, ghosts are real. What I just experienced is gonna be hard for me to overlook. I'm not trying to be rational no more. You guys win, ghosts are real. Twice now I've had a weird experience in the same place. My grandma's attic. Once a couple of years ago and just 5 minutes ago the second time. And let me start with the prequel. To give you an idea, my grandma has a house, and the attic is basically like a second floor over the whole house. It's filled with all sorts of things that we dump up there that we don't really need: tools, firewood, old toys from childhood, all that. Also up there is a short chair and a coffee table. When I take them out of the attic to the balcony, it's my favorite place to smoke in the house. Tobacco, not weed. I like the view and the wind, and sometimes I'm too lazy to bring them out and smoke in the attic, so looking around at all the junk. One day I was going to go up there, and as soon as I stepped foot on the first stair, I got a fight or flight response for seemingly no reason. It was the middle of the day, and I've been in the attic 1,000 times. I'm not scared of it. I'm not a kid. But for some reason I was getting chills, and my heart was just beating fast. As soon as I went up to the last step, I stopped and looked around the attic. I had nothing to be afraid of, but it's just instinct. I couldn't go into the attic without checking it out first. Spend like 30 seconds just looking into the attic in silence before the courage came back for me to walk forward. While walking towards the table for some reason, I had the thought of, what if a demon's watching me right now, and that's why I have this bad feeling? I instantly laughed it off and thought to myself, let him show himself. I'll show him who's boss. As soon as I finished that thought, I heard a loud shuffle like someone's footstep dragged on the ground. I instantly froze midway and just looked in the direction where that came from. Spent at least a minute just looking, frozen, expecting a big-ass rat or something to pop out from somewhere over there. When I finally got my courage back again, as soon as I was about to continue to the table, and finally do what I came for, another loud noise froze me. This time a distorted piano played, and I kid you not, the most demonic out-of-tune chord you could imagine. Like a sound a horror movie producer would put in a jump scare. And on cue, I of course immediately dashed toward the stairs and noped the fuck out of there. Went downstairs, entered the room my family was in, and tried my best to just pretend I wasn't just running from a demon. My mother heard the piano. She thought I'd found my childhood toys and was fooling around with them. I went with that story and told her that surprisingly the batteries were still holding out. Must still be good. I wasn't about to tell my family I seriously thought there was a demon in the attic. After I spent a couple of minutes downstairs regaining my composure, I started to think about things rationally again. I felt ashamed that I got scared of nothing. I'm an adult, damn it. Picked up my small balls and went up there again, determined to find that piano and ease my mind forever. I went up immediately, walked up to the place where the sound came from, picked up off the wall like a big garbage bag filled with toys from my childhood. I started taking things out from it and I found it, a cheap Chinese dingy toy piano. Tried pressing the keys, no sound. Flipped it around, opened the battery compartment, and it had like a brain fart when I saw there. It's like no batteries in that thing. I took it down with me, found some batteries and put them in, tried playing it, still no sound. Unfortunately, I failed to ease my mind. So over the next couple of weeks, I spent quite some time thinking about that incident. As time went on, I started rationalizing it more and more, thinking that maybe pianos like that make their final sound when their circuit board finally dies, kind of like parting words. Maybe the shuffle I heard was from my own feet, but because of the fear, it sounded like it was someone else's. The only thing that I couldn't make sense of was how this piano, well, it's been in that garbage bag for 15 years, found energy without batteries to make a sound out of its speakers, and a loud one at that. I even posted it here at one point, hoping somebody could ease my mind and offer an explanation. And in the end, as time went on, I just brushed it off. Told myself I'm no engineer. I don't know how currents work and shit. There could be some weird way that happened that was normal. It was just a coincidence. I went to the attic countless times after that and nothing ever happened. No weird sounds, no explainable paranoia. Just peace and quiet as it should be. Well, right until today. Recently I'd been doing construction work on the house every weekend. Go up to the attic 20 times a day to fetch something or to have a smoke break. We finished the work, went to bed. Now, before you accuse me of being a skeptic rationalizer, I try to keep an open mind. Recently, I've been getting into trying out astral projection. It's a nice little meditation. Haven't succeeded yet, but the effects are quite trippy and quite fun. So I'm laying in bed browsing the AP subreddit before I decide I'm going to go up there to smoke one last cigarette before I go to sleep. The front door's loud, and I don't smoke in the house, so in the attic I go. In that same exact way, as soon as I set foot on the first stair, I get this immense feeling of something is amiss. Now, some years passed since that last time that this has happened, and naturally my small balls have grown at least a little bit. So it didn't stop this time. I just went up, sat on my smoke table, lit my cigarette, and remember the last time this happened, the piano. Like any sane person, I started a monologue in my head and sort of trying to banish the potential ghosts. My monologue continued until my cigarette went out, and here's sort of a recreation. I don't know if there's demons up here or whatnot, but you can't spook my ass. I can't touch you right now, but I'm learning this technique for me. Let me come into your house. Trust me, tonight I'm coming and killing your dumbasses. I'm doing it for revenge for when you scared me. Now's your last chance to try to scare me away. Try me again, bitch. Then I put my cigarette out, quite amused at my little monologue. And here we go again. As soon as I finished my monologue and said, "Try me," a loud sound as something on my left drags across the floor. This time I caught it with my peripheral as I turned around. A sack filled with dry sticks for the fireplace, was moving across the floor. It was defying the laws of physics. Gravity can't do that. It can't make it move that distance, especially when there's so much friction that it made a loud sound. It's also not heavy. It weighs like a couple 100 grams, so it can't slide like that or even cause that friction unless someone's pushing on it from the top. I shot up, stayed fixated on the sack. I was convinced not to let a rat, for example, run away without me seeing it. Didn't move for a couple of seconds, so I went up to it, took all the sticks out, checked every corner of that thing, no rats inside. Put the sticks back in, said out loud, "Don't touch it again." I said my piece already and I meant it. And if there was an evil entity up there, I'm gonna banish it. Although at that point I was starting to feel like I'm bluffing. I walked up the stairs, but before I went down, I stopped and looked back at the attic. Although my knees were weak, arms were heavy, vomit on my sweater already, wasn't gonna give in to my fear. So I stared into the void for a couple of seconds to establish my dominance. And again, as if a reply, the sack lightly got dragged, though this time just a little bit for a split second. Spent a couple more seconds looking at it and slowly went down the stairs with a confident walk, shaking a little. Originally, I was going to go to bed, but adrenaline got a little bit high now, so I'm sitting on the toilet writing this, maybe with a ghost proofreading over my shoulder. I'll take any proofreader anybody's got, ghosts included, just so you know. Sorry to make this so long. I tried my best to write it as sort of an entertaining thing. This seemingly uneventful experience I found just too powerful. I don't think I can ever rationalize this. It's just too many things on top of each other. The strong fight or flight I get before the event, the timing that makes this feel like a reply, the hard-to-explain sound and movement. I know there aren't a lot of skeptics browsing the sub, but I'd still appreciate some guesses as to what it could have actually been. I'm now a bit of a believer. Can't over-rationalize things by myself anymore. I don't know if this spirit could be good or bad, so I won't take any extra measures right now. So please don't reply with "throw salt on it" or anything like that. Unless I wake up with a cigarette burn on my cheek and come asking for help with how to banish a demon. Heard a person talking when I came in the house. My husband and I live in a ranch-style home. The woman that previously owned the house with her was her husband that was killed in a car crash. I lived here a couple of years with nothing. Then I started noticing an unexplainable perfume smell in one of our guest rooms. I chalked it up to an old spill or something, but the room has been completely remodeled and the smell comes and goes. My mother was placed in that room during her hospice in fall of 2018, and my father-in-law was also there for his hospice in the spring of 2019. Both passed in that same room. My mother was ready to be with her Lord and Savior while my father-in-law fought death and was so very scared until the end. Since we continue to have the perfume smell, which can now be smelled in both guest rooms, I've seen a smallish figure walk across the hall from the bedroom to the bathroom. We've seen multiple shadow figures. A couple of days ago, I was home alone and walked next door to the neighbor's dinner and grabbed the mail from the box, and as I came in the door, I was sorting the mail and it made it to the counter. I set the mail down, and before I realized, I heard someone talking from down the hall. As soon as it registered, I looked up. Talking stopped. Due to past trauma, I'm extremely a vigilant person. I didn't realize until a couple hours later that I never checked the house for an intruder. Totally not like me at all. It was like I normalized the voice and I didn't feel threatened. And as a bit of a side note, all the windows were closed and no tech was playing. Interested in hearing your thoughts. A new house experience years ago. I honestly can say that I know exactly the feeling people get when they have to walk through a section of a building that you never really felt comfortable walking through. As if all eyes would turn on you, like even though you're alone, no matter the time of day and how the feeling never subsides, no matter how many times you walk through it. That was truly creepy, but I never felt anywhere at the new house. Anyway, this one minor experience brought more questions and really no answers as to what I saw. It's about our third day moving from a couple of towns away to our new home. We're just four in our family. We had an uncle and aunt, just to help being like 9 years old, but I wanted to play. My aunt and uncle were from my mother out in the front yard. My brother near me standing pretty much in the doorway next to me. Just another ordinary move day, grab more until you remember I looked down the hallway and weirdly I seen somebody peek their head around the corner of what would be my parents' room. I was oddly curious as the way they were peeking was like you do when you hide behind a corner of a wall. You just peer your head enough to see, like hide and seek. I looked at the face, but oddly you couldn't really make out any noticeable features, just seemed blurry. But it was obviously somebody's face peeking around, but as a kid you aren't really aware of what you can and can't be, what things can and can't happen. So for instance, even all these years later, the distance of the hallway, I'm not really sure I'd be able to make out at least some semblance as to who it was. The face, as featureless as it was, I thought at the time it was my father just having fun. Now, it was so long ago I couldn't remember if I went to check or not. Don't recall myself walking down the hallway. I only looked again when they disappeared and asked my brother, "Wait, who was doing that?" He was busy looking somewhere else and he gave no notice and simply responded, "What was what?" I told him I think I saw Dad hiding. He didn't even care as he continued talking to me and said something that hinted everyone was outside. I said, "Yeah, right, I just saw Dad in the room. He's hiding from us." He kind of laughed if I was joking, but I weirdly had no desire to check if it was my father. Figured he was hiding something he doesn't want us to know. He did own a handgun. Seems unrelated. Then, just as I ignored my father, I heard my aunt and mother coming, followed by my uncle and then my father. I knew at 9 it would have been impossible for my dad to do that, peek and make it to the back door. So visible from where I was and nowhere near the closet area, it was a weird feeling to come to the conclusion that who I saw wasn't anyone from my family. It's been a good house to us and never had any bad feelings or vibes. The only other thing I can think of is our home in which we're moving from had a death in it. The previous tenant had passed away in my parents' bedroom, but they never told us, understandably, until we moved out of that house. My mother had mentioned once in the past at her older home that she was blow-drying her hair and she put me in the crib to sleep. She came out to the horror of finding me literally inches away from the end of the bed. I was months old at the time, so I have no recollection, of course, but my mother said it scared her greatly. I didn't fuss, cry, or make any noise as I was somehow got out of the crib, but my mother took it as more of a sign to watch us closer, I guess. If the older tenant was still there and meant harm, we didn't feel it. My mother just watched my brother and I much closer. He was only 18 months older, so it could have been him just moving me. The only reason I bring this up is perhaps the older lady was making sure that we were okay in our new home. My dad couldn't. How had he been able to get out without being seen if he was, by the closet? You need to walk back in the side of the hallway to use the backsliding door, and the other back door was closer to my brother and me at the time. Not to mention, from the time I'd seen the face to when I'd seen my father, couldn't have been more than 45, maybe 60 seconds. One event in my life I still question to this day. I know what I saw, but who it was, I got no idea. The only reason it stands out as paranormal to me is the face features or lack thereof. Should have been able to make out something at that distance, like 25 feet, for it to be as blurry as it was. And I have great eyesight. It's nearly impossible in my mind. No weird house history to my knowledge either. Anybody else have something similar happen? Mr. Mojo Rising. I feel guilty that I didn't tell my boyfriend about one of the entities in his house. Back in September, I saw 2 different spirits in my boyfriend's house. I only told him about one. Now I think the other is messing with his family because they weren't prepared for it. The first one I saw was almost certainly an angel. It was tall and faceless and like paper white figure with a pair of huge wings that wrapped around its body. I saw it standing at the top of the staircase like it was watching over everyone. It was vivid. I stared at it for a pretty long time. Then I blinked and it was gone. I told my boyfriend about it and he was happy to hear it. The second was about a week later and was just as, if not more vivid, but more threatening. It was a shadowy figure that looked like the black silhouette of a ballerina, sort of standing on point. Almost completely featureless, except it had glowing red eyes. It was standing near where I'd seen the angel, but slightly further down the hall outside of one of my boyfriend's sister's rooms. It gave off a horribly angry energy. In a weird way, it gave off the impression that it was judging me based on my sort of femininity or lack thereof. Like it was disgusted with me for being less womanly than it would like. Same as with the angel. I looked at it for a while, but it was gone when I blinked. I wanted to tell my boyfriend, but whenever I tell him about previous negative supernatural experiences or even make jokes about anything other than good spirits, it makes him really uncomfortable. Having seen the angel just a few days prior, I figured his family was protected, so I didn't even bring it up. But now, 2 nights ago, find out that his oldest sister's been having nightmares and sleep paralysis for weeks now, seeing a dark figure outside of her room. Same place I saw the ballerina. I don't know for certain if it's the same figure I saw. Haven't really asked details, but given where she's been seeing it and the fact the spirit was definitely associating itself with femininity and his sister the one being targeted, feels like more than a coincidence, let's just say that. I thought that of all the people, she'd be the safest because she's more classically feminine, at least compared to me, but now I like sitting here thinking about it, it's probably exactly why it's going after her in the first place. My boyfriend says he's going to do a cleansing of the house soon, so I'm sure she'll be fine. But I can't help but feel like if I'd told him about it sooner, that it could have been dealt with before his sister was affected. My sister's house. So this was a few years ago, but I thought I'd share because to this day, it's one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me. Basically, a few years ago, my sister lived in this house, and it was a huge house, 3 stories, 5 bedrooms. It was a house share. At the time, my sister was the only one living there, so all the other rooms were vacant. My sister's bedroom was on the ground floor next to the kitchen. One night I was staying there with her and she'd gone to bed a couple of hours ago and just suffering with insomnia at the time. So I was in the kitchen just talking on the phone. It was like 3 a.m. I think. While I was on the phone, I got this horrible, overwhelming feeling of being watched. It was like something, like not someone, like something was in the room with me. Whatever it was, didn't want me there. Tried to ignore it, try to continue my conversation a few more minutes, but it got to the point where I just straight up just didn't feel safe. Told my friend I'm going to bed. Hung up the phone. I went into my sister's room and she'd always told me to lock the door behind me, even when there's nobody else in the house. It was a standard lock that just had to be turned, so I did and grabbed my blanket and lay on the floor to sleep. I'd only been laying there for a minute or two when I heard the sound of a lock clicking and the door creaking open. Suddenly that feeling of dread was back. Took me a minute, but I finally built up the courage to turn around and check. Door was wide open. That was while I was staring at the door, and I couldn't see anything, but I could literally feel this thing watching me. I was frozen. Finally managed to reach my hand out to shake my sister awake, and she only had to get up and close and lock the door. I physically couldn't. I was just too afraid. Old Ouija story. This happened several decades ago. A friend got 3 of us to using a Ouija board. Thought it was sort of a goofy one or a fake. As it got weirder, wondered if there might be some kind of unintentional subconscious influence happening. Started harmless, but got darker. Many spirits became threatening over time, began to admit to being the same individual. Felt like I was being pranked, so I quit. Third friend, not the instigator, seemed weirdly obsessed, wanted to do it more, and stated doing it alone. Then one night in an outdoor party, I'm calling them the instigator. The instigator got it out with the obsessed friend for a spooky laugh. There was about 10 teenage boys watching, mocking, and laughing. Spirit eventually identified as the usual negative spirit and used some new names that many, many years later I saw associated online with demonic entities. Anyway, Spirit got really pissed by the mocking and the insulting comments and questions, especially from one loud friend. It also mentioned other people that we knew that we were talking to. It was pretty confusing. The loud friend thought that we were messing with him and threatened to destroy the board. The spirit directly threatened him, so he grabbed the board and broke it in 2 pieces. There was a bizarre sort of "now what" sort of a pause, and then the group decided that they should burn the board, being the best idea for the group of drunk teens. At this point, most felt that they were going to just go along with the joke, but some were getting kind of freaked out. We tried to burn the board. It wouldn't light. Had to go to a 7-Eleven, empty 2 entire containers of charcoal lighter fluid before it finally caught. As it burned, my obsessed friend was visibly upset and mumbled that he now has to make one. I asked what the fuck, and he said, "It told me how." So days later we found out a group of kids from the same high school was also on a Ouija board that night. It was also mentioning us to them, including that we had made it angry. This was before cell phones. When we were at an outdoor party, so nobody knew the other group at the party night, but several more days later, the loud friend who was threatened was was in a serious car accident, being ejected from a pickup, and he survived. As far as I know, the story ends there. I was not aware of anyone using a Ouija board after that. Our first haunting. I was around 17 when this happened. I was a smoker, but my parents didn't like it when I would smoke in the house, so I'd always go to sort of the pantry that has a tiny window and smoke in there. I often have trouble falling asleep, so I'd always go for a smoke between midnight and 3. Everyone in the house is sleeping, I'm bored, so I'm on my way to smoke. And as soon as I get in front of the pantry door, I just stop. I had this awful feeling in my gut and I just couldn't get in there, even though I was craving a smoke really bad. Go back to bed and make another attempt later, but the same thing happens. Well, I sort of just wind up thinking nothing of it and I just go to bed. Same thing happens next night. But I do get in the pantry and I do start smoking. A couple of minutes pass by and I hear a light knock on my pantry door. Thought it was my mom just making sure it's me and, so I just go ahead and say back, "It's me." I continue smoking my cigarette and a couple minutes later I hear 3 louder knocks. I have a pretty short temper, so I immediately open the door and annoyingly say, "It's me!" I thought that it was my mom, but to my shock nobody was there. I just stand there for a second, and then I close the door and I just try to convince myself that it was in fact my mom who somehow disappeared in a second. A minute later, I'm on my way to my room. I see my mom exiting the bathroom. I ask her if she knocked on the pantry door. She just tells me to go to bed because she was half asleep. She couldn't be bothered, apparently. My family didn't believe me, thought I was crazy. But in just a few hours, don't think otherwise. That night I went to a birthday party and was sleeping over at a friend's place. I came back the following morning. My family had a complete change of heart. It was because my brother had a paranormal experience as well. So, while I was at the party, he was playing League of Legends and he had headphones on because he's talking to his friends. All of a sudden he felt somebody grab his hoodie. Thought it was me or mom telling him to keep quiet, but nope, no one was there. So the next day, we lit the frankincense and did another Eastern European ritual. It worked for a while. I still to this day don't know what that was. And may I add that this all happened around a big Christian Orthodox holiday. I have a lot of paranormal experience in my house, and they happen from time to time. Sometimes I'd have a paranormal experience twice in a month. Sometimes it'll happen once a year. I'm used to them at this point because thank God none of those experiences were dangerous. Just creepy. I live about 100 meters away from a cemetery, by the way. There was a knocking on the door. My uncle, who worked for a major airline, befriended a couple. The wife was Filipino, the husband was Japanese. They have a young daughter around 1 or 3 years old who mostly spoke Japanese, and they lived in a townhouse somewhere in the Philippines. They invited my uncle to visit their house one day, and they invited me to come along with them. So it was my uncle, my 3 cousins, and I that went there for a relatively good amount of time, planned to stay overnight. The day was normal, went to the mall, took a dip in the pool, ate some good food. We had some language barrier problems since the husband and daughter don't speak Filipino or English, but the wife translated for us, so it really wasn't that big of a deal. Their house, as I said, was a townhouse. It was enough to fit their family, but too small with guests like us. They had 3 floors. The first floor was turned into a storage or something where it's not really suited to be occupied, with like a dirty kitchen at the back. The front door of their house was basically non-existent. The main entrance to their house was a gate that was around a foot of the doorway, but other than that, the doorway was wide open. The stairs have 2 doors, one at the bottom and one on the second floor. The second floor was sort of their living room and a small kitchen. This is where we planned to sleep. Then there was the 3rd floor. That's where the family's bedroom was. But their stairs didn't have any door. So we settled in for the night on the floor with blankets and pillows. I don't really recall the arrangement that we had, so whose bedside, whose, I don't know. This was 2011. So anyway, we went to bed, but after some time I was woken up by my cousin, who I'm going to call Rose. She was the second daughter out of the 3, and who I know was somewhat sensitive to the paranormal since they did something in the past to talk to her best friend who died early. Rose was probably beside me as I was the one who was sort of waking up first. She shook me awake and asked me to go listen if I heard something. Groggily, I tried to listen for anything, and after a few minutes I heard knocks on the door. It woke me up fully. She explained that she hasn't gone to sleep and was on the phone, and it was past midnight and the knocking on the second floor just started. That's when she freaked out and woke me up. The knocking was in 4 successions, with at least 2 or 3 seconds in between those 4, and then they'd stop, and after a minute or 2 would knock 4 times again. The knocking didn't stop at all since she woke up. It wasn't so loud, but solid and continuous, like a human was programmed to knock that way exactly the same. Both scared, but we didn't move to answer the door or ask who's behind the door, since they both knew nobody could, get in or was downstairs. It wasn't somebody from outside, as there was no main door to the house, and the knocking came from the second door of the staircase. So we woke up her older sister, asked her to listen, and when she did, she stayed silent for a few seconds. Tried to listen to which the knocks came, but she said that she didn't hear it. Went back to sleep, pissed off pretty much, just thinking that we were playing with her. We also woke up her youngest sister. She told us the same. Rose and I looked at each other in fear, and we tried our hardest to go back to sleep, covering our ears. The only reason why I can't hear it is because I already established that my hearing is also sensitive to these type of experiences rather than seeing entities from a young age. Though I can still see glimpses, but not that clear. In the morning during breakfast, we told everybody that we experienced, and my wife told her husband that she thinks it was a mononoke or a yurai, which was monsters and spirits in Japanese. Scarier for them because the number 4, shi, in Japanese, which means death, is considered to be bad, like how 13 is in Western cultures. My music box just played on its own at 4 a.m. I just wanted to post this here since I'm up. 30 minutes after this happened, and I don't see myself falling asleep anytime soon. To give some background, my boyfriend gifted me one of those mechanical movement music boxes a while ago. First, we played it pretty often. It was a cute song from a movie that we both adore. But for at least a month now, it's been sitting on a shelf next to my bed unplayed. Recently, I've been feeling some weird energy next to my side of the bed. I'm an empath. I tend to be sensitive to energies. But in all honesty, when it's time to go to sleep, I try to dismiss it because who really wants to have ghost activity? Not me. Hard pass. Plus, I love horror films, and I binged a series recently and assumed I freaked myself out with it. At least a little. But some nights it's been harder to ignore. It's been scary. Well, rather, I've been scared to get up and use the restroom. That's how bad it is. One night I even switched places in bed with my boyfriend because the gaze of it felt so strong. I've had moments where I think I see something in the dark but dismiss it because it's too frightening to acknowledge. My boyfriend even had a bout of sleep paralysis in which he dreamt that I asked him, what was behind me. Tonight I struggled again with the fear and anxiety. I eventually managed to drift in and out of sleep, at least until 4. That little mechanical movement music box started to play the tune entirely on its own. My boyfriend and I were startled awake. I was disoriented and thought his alarm was going off. Immediately we turned the light on. We both were pretty much freaked out that he'd been able to go back to bed. But we did burn some sage and did a blessing to try to ease my mind, which hasn't been particularly effective as I'm writing this now. I looked at the little box and tried to see if there was any way it could have done what it did on its own. I got no answer. You have to twist this little knob at the bottom twice for it to even play. I don't know, you guys. I want to be wrong because the idea of something in my home, despite all of my protecting charms, is really frightening. Hopefully the sun comes out soon so I can feel safe to sleep. My friend saw my ghost. So when I was in junior in high school, I suffered from pretty severe depression. My home life wasn't exactly rainbows and sunshine. It was nearing the end of October, and it was nearing the end of, pretty much everything. My school was throwing a homecoming dance. I didn't really want to go, but my friends convinced me. I won't go into great detail, but the night ended horribly. It was the straw that broke the camel's back, as they say. Fast forward to the next morning. I woke up all puffy-eyed and feeling absolutely hopeless. My mom and brother left to the store, leaving me home alone. I didn't waste a minute. Went into the medicine cabinet, grabbed all the pill bottles I could in my arms, and went all in. Last thing I remember was pulling up to the ER. My mom tried to get me out of the seat. It all happened so fast. I didn't text my friends I loved them, and I didn't indicate in the slightest what I intended on doing, just nothing. Clearly, my attempt didn't work as I'm writing this now, but while in the hospital I had a seizure. This may be important later, but after a few days at the sort of psychiatric facility, I was allowed phone calls. So I called my best friend and told her what happened. Well, she was shocked. Rumors were flying around school, per usual at the small private school, that I was pregnant. My mom pulled me out of school and all this other stuff. One guy was joking to a group of people, my 2 best friends among them, that maybe I died, which is super funny, I know, but my best friend P said that she felt a chill run down her spine as soon as he had said it. She gave him an earful. My other friend sort of pulled P aside and they started discussing what could have happened. A told P that thought that he was making me walk down the street a couple days before and tried to yell at me. The person didn't turn or respond. B said that she had an awful feeling in her gut that something was very wrong. I often forget that this happened, because understandably I want to put the past behind me. It was a long time ago. But I saw a post of A's earlier today and thought how odd it was that somebody as rational and realistic as him to see what he did. Feel confident enough that it was me to share what he saw it with. Makes me wonder if my soul was in sort of an in-between state, just wandering around, or maybe I did die. I just switched into a reality where I lived. Spooky stuff. The strangest thing I've experienced to date. My name is Trevor. I live in southern Maine. My whole life I've felt connected to something other than what's in front of me. Everywhere I experience small things, and sometimes those things aren't easily explained. My most recent and strange experience happened just last night, the night of October 17th. I moved into a new apartment in June. It's owned by a family friend, so before I moved in I painted the walls and did some other personalization just for fun. The first time I stepped foot into this apartment I felt very uneasy. I'm not sure what it is, but the place just didn't feel right. Like many things have happened while I've been here. Last night was by far the worst. Maine was being hit by a thunderstorm. I had gone to bed expecting to lose power. Woke up at 3:30 a.m. and felt like someone or something was watching me. I have a night light near my bed, which is projecting a shadow onto my wall and ceiling. The shadow became bigger and bigger until I felt like whatever was there was right behind me. It started to roll over when the power went out and I could no longer see anything. I don't remember falling back to sleep, and I just woke up for work around 6:15 a.m. per usual. But I felt very strange. After getting up and walking to the bathroom, I realized my jaw was very sore. I also had a gash on the inside of my lip that wasn't there before. It's like I'd been punched in the face and my jaw still sore at the same time of this writing. I really don't know what this was, and I absolutely couldn't have been dreaming. I just want to share this, in case anybody else has experienced anything similar, waking up with cuts and bruises you didn't know you had before you went to bed. I am guilty of punching myself in the face in my sleep, so it could have been that. Hearing or seeing doppelgangers. So I have a sort of a ghost story. It's going to be pretty long because it's two different stories really, but probably the same entity. These two incidents actually happened, and I to this day have no damn clue what it was, or what I heard, or what I saw. We have tons of other occurrences in between, but none so terrifying as these two. Other than one of my kids being hid in their sleep and a handprint being left on them. But anyhow. I live in Louisiana. Sort of like the breeding ground for this kind of stuff, right? The block I live on is just wrong. I could go on about it, but I won't. We've joked that it may have its own little hellmouth. But incident number one, basically the hood cat lady. I leave food and toys and even a cute little bed for my little friends. There's one that especially took a liking to me that I like to just sit outside at night and early morning and cuddle with for a bit. It was about 2 a.m. As usual, I go refresh bowls, and I noticed how cold it was in the middle of the summer in Louisiana. My door was shut, so it's not the AC. But I get this odd feeling, and I begin hearing whispers, and this voice, kid you not, it was like an octave lower than Voldemort's. Look up, look at me. Stupid me, I looked up, and in the backseat of my car, obviously no one was, at 2 a.m. was my son. My 2-year-old son was in the house. Asleep. Only the features were off. It was only a badly drawn memory from somebody who had only seen him once. The eyes were too narrow, the smile way too wide, and only half of his body was showing. I looked down, finished my task trying to look as calm as possible, and noped back into the house. Locked, chained the door, salted all the windows and doors. Incident number 2. My husband works evening and closing shifts. That usually brings him home after like 2 a.m. And one night in our room, my toddler in bed with me, he'd begun hearing knocking sounds and muffled voices around 10 p.m. Assuming it's neighbors, I ignored it. As the night went on, the knocking sounds began to sound as if they were coming from closets and actual walls, even the ceiling. The voices got closer and began to sound more male. At 1 a.m. there was a bang at our back door, which is in the bedroom leading to the fenced-in backyard with a chain and a lock that only husband has the key to cause. You know, it's the hood and we have small kids. The voice I heard was literally my husband. "It's me. Let me in, please, love." in his exact tone and using the name he calls me. Even my son jumped up yelling, "Daddy's home." Something was off. He never comes to the back door. He calls me or presses the doorbell and leave a ring, so what the fuck? I almost went to open the door because it sounded so much like him, but instincts kicked in, grabbed my son and my phone, and noped out of the room to my son's room, brought my daughter in his room, and locked the door. I called my husband, and you guessed it, he was still at work. Couldn't possibly have been him. When he comes home, he looked around, saw no evidence of anybody being there, no camera footage. No neighbors saw or even heard anything. And that's a lot, because over here, everyone is nosy, knows everyone and everything, and, well, pretty much at all hours. Including whatever hour you're listening to this. And with that, sweet dreams. Hearing or seeing doppelgangers. So I have a sort of a ghost story. It's going to be pretty long because it's two different stories really, but probably the same entity. These two incidents actually happened, and I to this day have no damn clue what it was, or what I heard, or what I saw. We have tons of other occurrences in between, but none so terrifying as these two. Other than one of my kids being hid in their sleep and a handprint being left on them. But anyhow. I live in Louisiana. Sort of like the breeding ground for this kind of stuff, right? The block I live on is just wrong. I could go on about it, but I won't. We've joked that it may have its own little hellmouth. But incident number one, basically the hood cat lady. I leave food and toys and even a cute little bed for my little friends. There's one that especially took a liking to me that I like to just sit outside at night and early morning and cuddle with for a bit. It was about 2 a.m. As usual, I go refresh bowls, and I noticed how cold it was in the middle of the summer in Louisiana. My door was shut, so it's not the AC. But I get this odd feeling, and I begin hearing whispers, and this voice, kid you not, it was like an octave lower than Voldemort's. Look up, look at me. Stupid me, I looked up, and in the backseat of my car, obviously no one was, at 2 a.m. was my son. My 2-year-old son was in the house. Asleep. Only the features were off. It was only a badly drawn memory from somebody who had only seen him once. The eyes were too narrow, the smile way too wide, and only half of his body was showing. I looked down, finished my task trying to look as calm as possible, and noped back into the house. Locked, chained the door, salted all the windows and doors. Incident number 2. My husband works evening and closing shifts. That usually brings him home after like 2 a.m. And one night in our room, my toddler in bed with me, he had begun hearing knocking sounds and muffled voices around 10 p.m. Assuming it's neighbors, I ignored it. As the night went on, the knocking sounds began to sound as if they were coming from closets and actual walls, even the ceiling. The voices got closer and began to sound more male. At 1 a.m. there was a bang at our back door, which is in the bedroom leading to the fenced-in backyard with a chain and a lock that only husband has the key to cause. You know, it's the hood and we have small kids. The voice I heard was literally my husband. "It's me. Let me in, please, love." In his exact tone and using the name he calls me. Even my son jumped up yelling, "Daddy's home." Something was off. He never comes to the back door. He calls me or presses the doorbell and leave a ring, so what the fuck? I almost went to open the door because it sounded so much like him, but instincts kicked in, grabbed my son and my phone, and noped out of the room to my son's room, brought my daughter in his room, and locked the door. I called my husband, and you guessed it, he was still at work. Couldn't possibly have been him. When he comes home, he looked around, saw no evidence of anybody being there, no camera footage. No neighbors saw or even heard anything. And that's a lot, because over here, everyone is nosy, knows everyone and everything, and, well, pretty much at all hours. Including whatever hour you're listening to this. And with that, sweet dreams.